From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Watching the water.
The basis is probably going to get worse on soybeans between now and the end of harvest.
Concerns grow about whether we'll see a repeat this year of extremely low water levels on the Mississippi River. Outrunning the flames.
They said actually the fire is split off and it is headed your way towards your house.
Ranchers in Louisiana forced to take quick action as the state's largest wildfire closes in. And could the extreme heat and drought in the Midwest be nearing an end?
But we could be looking at some 1 to 3 inch rainfall totals.
Some hopeful signs right now on AgDay.
AgDay, presented by Pioneer. What's next happens when experience meets expertise. Pioneer. What's next happens here.
Good morning, I'm Clint Griffiths coming to you from our Farm Journal studios here in Kansas City. We're continuing to look ahead to harvest, and while crop conditions have continued to sink, drought has continued to expand across portions of the U.S. The latest drought monitor showing now 36% of the country is in some sort of drought. That's up 2% from last week and up 14% from 3 months ago. Iowa continuing to be in the bullseye. Now 91% of the state is in drought, with almost a quarter of the state in the extreme category. We showed you how condition ratings are dropping for corn and soybeans, and that is a direct result of that high heat and drought. Now, almost half of the nation's corn crop is in drought, up 4% from a week ago, and 43% of the soybeans are in drought, up 3% from the previous week. But there are some hopeful signs. The heat wave across much of the country is expected to break soon. That's due to a strong cold front arriving.
Put it all together over the next 5 days, not only will the heat wave end across the eastern U.S., but we could be looking at some 1 to 3 inch rainfall totals, particularly in the middle and northern Atlantic states over multiple days. That'll be in the form of showers and scattered thunderstorms.
Drought hasn't been much of an issue in Arkansas this year. The state's seeing its fair share of rain this season, but also some severe weather. The latest hitting Wednesday with a microburst hitting Little Rock, leaving thousands without power. Some of these neighborhoods were still cleaning up from a tornado that hit the area at the end of March. But there may be threats on the horizon weather-wise. Hurricane Lee has rapidly strengthened to a Category 2 storm with sustained winds of 105 miles per hour. Forecasters say Lee could turn into a dangerous Category 4 later today. The extremely dangerous core of Hurricane Lee is expected to remain north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands over the weekend.
Next week at this time, we may be talking about potential impacts of Lee on North America. Specifically, some of the model guidance suggests that Lee could approach the United States, then curve northward and either strike New England and the northeastern United States or Atlantic Canada. Given the fact that we are expecting a Category 4 to 5 hurricane over the open ocean by the weekend, this is something that will need to be monitored.
Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht joins us with the latest on our weather, including when those cooler temperatures will be moving in.
Yeah, Clint, up until this point, it's been about a dominant ridge of high pressure bringing those hot temperatures in and across the United States. Start to get back into more of a traditional pattern regarding the jet stream next week. That's where we have a ridge building back here to the west. So the Dakotas, Montana, all the way back down here into Texas and the Gulf Coast states. They expect above average temperatures during that time period. And then a trough is going to be digging a pocket of cool air in and across the Midwest over towards the East Coast with potentially some below average, if not normal temperatures. Again, that's from September 12th through September 16th. And you can almost smell this. Ken sending this in, cutting it in east central South Dakotas. Looks like that will make great feed for the cattle. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
All right, thanks, Matt. And while talk surrounds the latest hurricane, we're learning about the victims of the last big storm. Now, it's reporting that Hurricane Idalia killed 5 million chickens. The Messenger News reporting that when the storm hit Suwannee County in Florida's Big Bend, it ripped apart barns and chicken coops, killing many of those chickens. Others died in the high heat following the storm. Still, more had to be euthanized. And while relief from the heat is on the way for the middle of the country, that's not the case in the Deep South, which is expected to continue to see temperatures in the triple digits through the weekend, which is not good news for crews fighting Louisiana's largest wildfire and for farmers and ranchers in its path. As This Week in Louisiana Agriculture's Tammy Arender reports.
The southwest corner of the Bayou State is still ablaze. What's called the Tiger Island Fire has already scorched more than 30,000 acres in the Beauregard Parish area. The town of Maryville, about 1,500 residents, just about 5 miles from the Texas state line, evacuated.
Thursday, it took a turn for the worse. The winds had picked up and really started to make it just shift back towards Maryville.
Jeff Meadows is a lifelong resident of Maryville. He and David Smith, the Beauregard Parish Farm Bureau president, scour the scorched earth looking at the damage and for any hot spots. Meadows says that it was a scary night when he was told the fire was headed to his house and cattle.
The sheriff had told me, said actually the fire is split off and it is headed your way towards your house. So at that time I took action to try to move the cattle. I didn't know what to expect. You never know with a fire.
His family, along with volunteers from the community, got those cows moved.
I'd called several friends. My wife had put on Facebook that I needed help, and there were several trailers showed up. And there was actually some people from Texas over here. I never did catch their name, but they were trying to help people relocate animals, and I wish I'd have caught their names. So.
Meadows and others were able to bring their livestock to the covered arena, which is owned by the parish. And no livestock have been reported lost due to the blaze, but there have been some who've succumbed to heat stress.
We've already fought 511 fires so far this month. And so it is a massive effort. Everyone is working together. We have teams from 26 states, U.S. Forest Service, the military, everyone bringing to bear, and our men and women are working extraordinarily hard, and they're putting in 110%.
In Maryville, Louisiana, I'm Tammy Arender for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture.
All right, thanks, Tammy. And This Week in Louisiana Agriculture. The Ukrainian official says an agricultural company worker was killed in a drone attack launched by Russian forces. The attack happening in Ukraine's southern Odessa region. It's reported several settlements, ag infrastructure, and port facilities, including their elevators and administration buildings, were damaged in the attack. The area, which borders Romania, has recently become the main route for Ukraine to move ag products through since Russia ended the Black Sea grain deal. Now ports along the Danube River have become targets for Russia. Now, Russia says it has a deal in principle to move its grain to Africa. It says Moscow and Turkey have agreed to handle 1 million metric tons of grain to the continent at a discounted price with financial support from Qatar. Leaders say they will soon be entering into contracts with all parties to work out the technical aspects. Now, Russia had proposed the idea after leaving the Black Sea grain deal that had allowed Ukraine to ship its grain through Black Sea ports and onto places in need, such as Africa. The World Food Program says it's having to cut assistance to 10 million people. Now, it said it had to cut food assistance to 2 million in Afghanistan alone this month. And that brings the total number of Afghans who have lost its assistance this year to 10 million people. Leaders say it's due to a massive funding shortfall, and it's reported the program is often the last lifeline for women with dwindling options for making a living and feeding their children. The organization says it needs $1 billion over the next 6 months in order to feed those in need. And cotton producers, we haven't forgotten about you. Michelle Rook has a market outlook on that commodity coming up. And later, lower levels on the Mississippi River were a big concern last year for the entire ag industry. And it's not over yet. What Arkansas farmers are facing as they enter harvest coming up. Major grains dropped on Thursday along with cotton. AgDay's Michelle Rook dives into the cotton market with John Payne in today's Markets Now.
Joining us with Markets Now is John Payne. And John, let's talk about the cotton market, which has been fairly sideways recently. Talk about what could break us out either side of that.
Well, the Chinese economy is probably the most thing to watch here. They are the linchpin of Southeast Asia, which is essentially the linchpin for cotton manufacturing in the world. So you've had weak currencies there. It's kind of bled all the way down to the hierarchies of Asian demand would fall down to like Vietnam, and even prices there have surged. But at this point in time, with COVID coming back, there's concerns about demand. I think the market has a hard time, with what's going on in China. Are they going to be able to suffice from the consumer side of things? From the producer side, I think you'll see lower acreage here in the U.S. next year. You have problems in Pakistan and problems in India. I would imagine the market, especially if those deferred contracts, is going to need to find a floor. And I can't imagine anybody's going to stick their neck out and sell that far ahead, given the profit margins, the interest rates, and just the overall uncertainty with the global economy. So I think at this point in time, cotton in the shorter run probably runs into some issues when we see milling in the overseas markets. I think those folks will start to sell because they're not going to want to carry that risk. But long run, the amount of stimulus that China will use to try to help their economy, I think will eventually take hold, and I think that'll be inflationary as well.
So when does that kick in, though, that bullishness, and what should producers be doing from a marketing standpoint right now?
Well, buying insurance, that would be the one. I mean, at this point, the best thing that cotton producers have is the USDA insurance, because you can get it at good levels. You can lock in essentially a level that'll cash flow. So in reality, you use somebody like us to hedge before the crop insurance gets set. And I think right now we're entering that period where it makes sense to do so. And then I think looking at next year, watch that cotton price again. If it gets up into the mid-high 85s, the 90s, I think then you look to get ahead of it. I just don't think right now, the consumer is rationing. It's going to need to ration. And what we heard from the Fed on Friday was something that could kind of, I think, make a dent in consumer pocketbooks. And I think that's probably coming from clothing and retail sales.
All right. Thanks, John. John Payne with HedgePoint Global Markets. That is Markets Now. We'll have more AgDay coming up.
To find John's newsletter, This Week in Grain and Oilseeds, head over to www.thisweekingrain.com. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
I want to take a quick look at what we're watching deep in the Atlantic, something that we talked about yesterday and the day before. Hurricane Lee continues to churn, and it is going to become quite a big, if not strong, hurricane by the time we hit this weekend and then also into next week. Now, this timestamp says Tuesday at 8 a.m. as a Category 4 hurricane. No direct impacts to the United States or land up until that point, but the swell will already be felt on the East Coast as early as Tuesday and into Wednesday. But it's something that we're going to be following very closely into next week. Back to the precipitation forecast for the next 7 days. A trough is going to be digging. We talked about that earlier, and that's going to bring some rain. Now, this is not associated with that tropical system. This is all going to be from that jet stream starting to dig down to the south. We got some cooler air, dry in the Midwest, and then the Northeast is where we expect some of the heavier rain to accumulate over the next 7 days. The ridge of high pressure back out here to the west is going to keep things dry, not only into Washington and Oregon and California, but a little bit into Montana as well, where we're expecting those temperatures to stay above average next week, next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So that precipitation outlook, we're looking at dry conditions in and across the Midwest between September 12th and September 16th. Right under that ridge where the heat is going to be is relatively dry. And then as we looked at where the trough digs down to the south, that's where we could see some of those scattered showers, heavier downpours that in and across Pennsylvania, also into the Northeast. Now, overall, that jet stream is going to continue to show not only a ridge on the west, but a trough on the east, which is pretty typical for this time of year as we get into the fall season. A little bit more jump in the jet stream. Let's go take a look at what's going on in Nevada. Sunny, high around 83 degrees, low of 46. Cavalier, North Dakota, partly cloudy. Nothing cavalier about that. High 74, low of 49. Gulfport, Mississippi, sunny, high around 92.
One state that could have a big crop this year is Arkansas, but moving it out of the state could be another matter. An update next. It could be a banner year for yields in Arkansas. The state is forecast to pull some big numbers when it comes to corn, rice, and soybeans. But as the Arkansas Farm Bureau reports, there's concern profits could be in jeopardy due to dry conditions along the Mississippi River.
We started our harvest last week, and if you can start in August here in central Arkansas, that's a real bonus. Typically we start around the 1st of September, and so far what we've cut's been pretty solid. The corn's running over 200 bushel. I'm here in South Arkansas, had a really good corn crop. They're about to wrap it up down there.
Everything I've looked at this year, I think we're gonna have a phenomenal soybean crop. USDA right now has this picked at 53 bushels state average, which is a bushel better than we were the last 2 years. Typically I'm a little bit below that, but I think this year 53 may be a little bit short. It may be 53, it may be a little bit better than 53.
I really think for Lonoke County, rice harvest will really get going next week. I think it's going now, but I think they're having to really look for fields to cut. Now, I think the potential for rice exports this year in Arkansas is real good. The largest exporter this year came out and said they were going to ban. They got to make up that rice that's not being exported. They got to find it somewhere. And I think the rice crop's going to be pretty good if we can get it out and we don't get a hurricane or something doesn't pop up.
I think we're going to have a phenomenal soybean crop. Really early crop got planted. We're about 20% ahead of where we typically have been the last 5 years. Setting on about 20, 28, 30%, starting to drop leaves. And if you look at the 5-year average, it's 11. So we're well ahead of where we typically are. The crop as a whole, we're about 70% good to excellent. So I think we're setting on a really good crop. Last year with the drought we had, especially up in the Midwest and northern U.S., river levels got pretty low. The grain started backing up. Basis went pretty poor there at one point. The farmers really couldn't deliver a lot of their grain because the elevators on the river couldn't ship stuff downriver, and so they were starting to fill up, and then therefore there's really no place to put anything in the elevators on the river. With the drought we've had, up in the Midwest and here in the Mid-South a little bit, river levels are a little bit low. I haven't heard of any major concerns yet, but if you look at the long-term forecast, there's really not a whole lot of rainfall in the next few weeks. And so that could be a concern and a bottleneck. And so in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll really be, cutting a lot of soybeans, especially a lot of this early crop we got planted in April. Harvest is going to be a little bit earlier than we have been the last several years. So hopefully, the river levels at least, moderate and come back up so we can get some of this crop out, pretty rapidly down to the Gulf.
The corn that's coming off right now, it's putting pressure on the basis. Typically we can sell our corn for 20 cents over, 25 cents over. It's probably 20, 25 cents under right now. What I'm hearing is the river's low, and it's the corn's going to tie up a lot of barges. And the river's probably going to keep getting low because there's no rain in the Midwest. The people I've talked to, the basis is probably going to get worse on soybeans between now and the end of harvest, just because it's going to be hard to transportation barges. Right now, I think they're moving. I think they're doing okay, but it happened to us last year. There was a point in there where the basis really widened. Didn't last long. But if you were cutting beans and you didn't have a place to go, or you didn't have your basis or your price locked down, put you in a bad position.
The longer they have to hold that grain before it goes down the river to the Gulf, the more money they have to spend. So therefore, the basis is not going to be as good as it typically is if we can get the grain down the river, in a somewhat rapid fashion.
Our thanks to the Arkansas Farm Bureau for that update. Well, coming up, a different kind of harvest in Mississippi. An alligator that's one for the record books and in the country next. Here's something you don't want to run into out in the field, a giant gator. But this is no ordinary alligator. It's the longest one ever captured in Mississippi. The Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks says the 14-foot, 3-inch gator broke the state record for longest alligator harvested. A group of Mississippi hunters captured the reptile in the west central alligator hunting zone. It weighs over 800 pounds. Now, hunting alligators for sport has been permitted in the state since 2005. In 2021, a total of 776 alligators were caught. The average length of one of those gators was just under 8 feet. That's about half the length of this record-breaking capture. And that's all the time we have this morning. Thanks for watching. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.